Hi, and welcome to our webinar on Jim2 reporting. A common thing I hear when I talk to customers is that they don't know what they don't know. And as such, we'll cover each topic from basics to advanced usage to make sure that you're all fully informed of each section. I also wanted to let you know that these webinars and other short informational videos are available in our Learning Centre. You can find this on our website by going to jim2.com.au, highlighting resources and then clicking Learning Centre. Finally, before we get started, I wanted to thank everyone that filled out the survey ahead of this webinar. It was great to see what our customer base wanted to know more about on Jim2 reports. So let's start on today's topic, Jim2 and end of financial year insight reports. So, we've just passed the end of financial year for many of our Australian customers, so I thought that it might be a good idea to explore the kinds of reporting that customers might like to use to gain insights about how their business has performed over the previous 12 months. We'll start with a report that is more for helping close out a financial year, the stock valuation report. If we go to Management, Reports, Stock Reports, we can then look at Stock Value by GL Group. Oh, sorry. I'd like to introduce Ian, who'll be joining me for the webinar. He is having some webcam issues, so I think he was just on microphone. G'day, Ian. How you going today, mate?
Hi, Ash. Fantastic. Thank you for inviting me onto your little show.
Of course. So, Ian, with the stock valuation report, what are we actually looking at here? What does the stock value actually show?
Okay, I mean this report. It's a live report in Jim2 looking at stock valuation in this sort of a detail report where you're seeing the individual stock codes. What we're trying to do is show you the value of that stock based on its cost of goods, and then compare that to the general ledger value. So we're all familiar with GL groups and the fact that when you buy something in this case monitors for the top section, it comes in reports to that asset account for monitors. It's telling you in the stock value column that you can see there, it's just talking about what's the value of the stock as Jim understands it per product. And then as you move to the right, you'll see what's called the GL value, and that's the value of the ledger account that's in the accounting at the time. Then when you're looking at these things, there are other aspects such as this reserve and ready column. And what we're looking at there is just to talk about jobs that we've put into the system. We've selected stock from that group into that particular job. We haven't invoiced it yet to the customer, but we've either marked the job as job reserved, which some of you may use, which is our green dot, it's up on the ribbon, or it has been marked as ready to invoice. So in both cases, when you click those buttons, Jim2 knows which purchase order the stock will come off for those jobs when it's invoiced. So as you look at that report, stock value plus the ready and reserved stock equals the GL value in this case, and the variance is 0.
So why might there be a variance though? We can see some in the peripherals, for example. What can cause that?
Sure. Well, commonly rounding amounts will appear. So they're quite common. You will see rounding. And I think the key here is to view these amounts relative to the total. Is it material? Is it a very, very small percentage? And over the years, as you do work and you transact more and more products, you're going to see some rounding accounts come into it. It can be from decimal point work, can be just from the way in which the adjustments are done. When we look at it though, it could be a circumstance of not being what we call material. It's just too small. But there are other circumstances to look at here. Occasionally this can occur because people do general journals or adjustments against these accounts, which we don't recommend, by the way. So when we talk about general journals, we're talking about changing the balance of a stock account through a journal, not through selling or transacting stock. And that can occur if people manually do these journals.
Sort of a direct edit to the value listed in the GL group, right?
Absolutely right. That's very well said. And when we consider how that can occur, it's usually the circumstances is someone has gone into the general ledger, they've removed what we call a control tick to
Mhm.
allow that account to have general journals written against it. So our recommendation, don't allow that to occur. Don't remove the ticks from the control accounts on these type of asset accounts in your general ledger, and then you'll get much better control.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned that this was a live report. What are the implications of that?
Well, as in most of the things we do in Jim, these elements that you're seeing are all live. So as soon as a purchase order is moved to finished status and you save it, it will post those values to those GL accounts. That means these values you see right now, will change in another minute if someone was to finish another purchase order that was with respect to these products. Now, the same thing would occur with an invoice. If you invoice a customer, you do returns from customers, you do returns to vendor, you do stock adjustments. When they are moved to finished status, then what we're seeing is changes to these values. So it's not something that we do at the end of a day when you look at the report, it's current right now.
That is really good to know. Okay, so that's the stock value report. I think we'll take a quick look at the stock in advance liability report next. Ian, what is this report and why might customers need to run it?
Well, this is a really good report in terms of what it can display. There's two things. It's showing us, firstly, the stock that has been sold in advance. I'm sure that many of our customers would understand that inventory control is something we take very seriously in Jim2. And what we don't want to see is selling something we don't have in effect. We need to fix the problem to make sure we do have it in Jim before we sell it. So these products you're looking at, they've been sold in advance. In effect, they don't have any real cost to them as yet. And then the second section here is what we call purchases on received. It's just indicating that we have sold some stock that's come off a purchase order that is on received status. That in itself is not a problem. It's just an indication that you are selling stock from received POs, and that's perfectly fine in the workflow of Jim. Ash, the top section is the one I think people need to concentrate on. What that's telling us by seeing all these products is they haven't been what we call backfilled in Jim2, fabulous term. And backfilled is all about saying, have we applied the correct costs to those products that were sold in those jobs? It needs to be taken care of continually. You may sell things in advance, but you also need to make sure the backfill costs go through as well.
Right. And why is this important to do at end of financial year in particular?
Well,
I
when
know
we
you sort of said it needs to be done all the time, but what's the, the implications of the end of financial year?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest issue here and why I say do it all the time is every sale you put through where you're selling in advance, it's 100% GP. So we're not actually getting any costings to come through. So you're continually reporting incorrect profit while that occurs.
Right.
So yes, it is an end of year thing, mainly because when you get to a point of closing an end of financial year, and as we all know, we get plenty of time to close after the 30th of June, for example, for that year, you do need to have made these correct. You do need to have worked through these older transactions and made sure that they're backfilled.
To then ensure that your cost reporting is accurate. Yeah.
That's correct. Yes. I mean, it's our last chance before you close a financial year. It's your last opportunity to make sure that all your income and costs are passed across to the right sections of your general ledger, and backfilling is important for that. Job
Fantastic.
profit reporting is important for that.
Right. Fantastic. Well, next up, let's get some insight into the business analysis feature. So just in the management tab, if we click business analysis, I might set this to last financial year is already there and hit run. So this is a great tool for taking a look at how money has moved through the business in a relatively straightforward snapshot. I will point out that there are a few different ways to see the last year's data as well as how to compare it to historical data. By using the style drop down at the top, standard will show us information about the date range that we've selected, but there are other options to compare year to date or even compare the previous year. There are also options to view the data in a variety of time periods to sort of break it up into different sections. And we can also choose to group by database, company, or even the GL groups, or GL departments rather. You also have the option of including multiple databases and different companies that are in those databases if you're using multi-company. So Ian, what's the benefit of taking the time to look at the business over the last financial year in this context?
Well, importantly, this is about what has happened. So this report, whilst it's a live screen, and so things are continually transacting here as well,
Mhm.
the way in which you filter it allows you to see things that have happened over a period of time. This area of reporting also, of course, gives you more information that falls outside of your stock and your labour areas. So now we're starting to talk about expenses that are incurred by the business or income from other sections. It's used commonly in monthly or an annual context. So you've got a lovely split there of a series of columns that are all in months, and we can
Mhm.
see some values showing up. The values in these reports commonly used by directors of business, commonly used by accountants, and certainly used for reporting to places such as the ATO. I think the biggest benefit here for most people is seeing the benefits of work they've done and how it came back as a report, how the income has changed from previous years, for example, how the income is different from budgets that might have been set.
So if we say do a previous year comparison, understanding that this is a demo database and won't have very accurate data in whatsoever, but if we maybe do, well, let's say yearly, we can start to compare our year-on-year entries in the GL groups.
Yeah, I mean, it's where the information is like for like, you can certainly review. And we can see the columns sitting side by side there to give us that information of change. An example could be to review the fact that you have increased or decreased sales revenue, income against these accounts over those time periods, changes in your commissions or your wages expense or your marketing and vehicle expenses. And they're areas that are starting to fall outside of stock. So you're seeing this picture, this accounting picture, rather than the inventory related picture specifically that you see through other areas of Jim2.
Fantastic. Well, next up, let's take a look at the different ways to record labour hours, and then we can take a look at the profit generated by labour hours across jobs and projects. So when thinking about labour hours, there's really two types to record, and that's actual labour and billable labour. The actual labour being the time that's actually spent on the job and is therefore the cost, and the billable labour, which is the amount that you're charging your customers for that labour. Ian, is there a reason that we don't directly translate the actual labour into billable labour?
There are an awful lot of words in these explanations and questions, aren't there, Ash?
I do what I can.
And I'm going to continue that theme. I mean, consider the definition of billable as being the labour that you're prepared to show or invoice your customer. So when we talk about a job and we put what's called labour codes onto that job, we're actually putting ourselves in a position where we're saying to our customers, this is what we are invoicing you for. This is the time we are billing you for. And that could be very different from actual. In our Jim2 management reports, we represent income, value of the invoiced billable labour in one section, and then in another, we can represent the time that was taken and the costs that were incurred from taking that time. So our actual labour is really important to tell us what is the time that we took to do this work, and consequently, what is the cost of us doing that work. Quite different, probably, from what we're actually going to invoice our customer. Now, I can imagine for most of our customers, they would see that the actual time is a basis or a validation for the billable. We look at the bottom, we see in this case here on your screen that there's 4 hours worth of labour, and then we're going to use that to build our billable labour for that particular job, but they don't have to be the same. In our case, throughout the years, I mean, our billable labour comes nowhere near our actual labour. And I'm talking about that from a Happen business point of view. So the amount of time we spend doing things and we track all our labour is quite different from the billable that we put out into the marketplace and invoice our customers for.
Right. And what direction is that swinging in?
Yeah, significantly less. The billable labour is significantly less than the actual labour we spend. And part of that is because we're a support business anyway, so that we have,
Right.
as you can imagine, we spend a lot of time doing support. We track all that actual hour costs, so we know what these support jobs cost us, and yet they don't get billed as billable labour to our clients. So,
Right.
it helps us work out whether we should or shouldn't be charging. And I suppose that's the other angle of actual labour. When we look at the actual labour tab, we also have this space called comments where we can explain the work that we're doing. That may not be something that's really relevant to the customer who's getting an invoice. So it helps us keep a dialogue in our minds of what went on with that job and how we spent our time.
Fantastic. So to start looking at profits on hours, we'll need to know what they cost us. So to do this, we need to have the rate populated on the user card file. You can find that here. This figure should not be the hourly rate that you're paying your staff, but instead should be the collection of all costs associated with having that staff member. What sort of things should be included in this rate, Ian?
Well, I'd go a little further than just the costs associated with a staff member. I'd actually see
Okay.
it representing the cost to the business of providing an hour of labour. So if we look at that screen as you have it right there, you're very inexpensive there, Ash, in terms of what we think you cost us to provide you. So that's looking at $25 an hour is the cost of our business putting you forward to spend time on a job. Now these costs, this calculation of cost, should include any costs involved in providing service, repair facilities, tools of trade should come into the costing, occupational health and safety costs, PPE costs, machine maintenance costs. They're all about the service work that's being done and therefore should be contributing to how much an hour of a labourer's time would go into a job. If I'm repairing something, it's not just the amount of time I'm spending, it's also the things I'm using to do the repair that can come into that costing.
Right.
Now, the calculation can then be a total of all those service costs divided by the total of hours expected of all your employees, for example, over the course of a 6-month or yearly period. So here is where we can tie together two things we've already spoken about. One is the amount of, on the P&L, for example, the service costs and expenses showing on the P&L for a period of time, and then dividing that value by the number of hours that your service team could provide in that amount of time. That says I've got a cost of X, which is quite huge, and I've got a number of hours that we could provide, divide them, and you'll be able to see what that rate is. Now, I've given a lot of food for thought just in that paragraph, but
yeah, that is a
really,
lot to consider.
really happy to discuss this with any of our customers and just go through this process to talk about how we see this. I guess what I want to stress is something you started with. It's not just about a salary. It's about
Right.
all the costs to provide a person to do work.
So we're talking not just about the hourly wage, superannuation, taxes. We're talking about the masks they might need to wear to work on a machine, or the gloves that they need to put on, training courses, things like that.
That's correct, because if they're not being recovered in some sense, they're a cost to the business for doing that particular job. And we're going to go on in this webinar and talk a little bit more about reporting here, and we'll see how that can actually be a concern if you're not tracking this information.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's the cost of users. We can see the rate is appearing next to the actual labour. So we can record the actual time that staff are spending on jobs, and of course we can charge for the labour hours as stock. So how do we bring that together to see what profit has been made on our jobs?
All right, well, one of the great things about using Jim2 and having both management reports and accounting reports is that we can run things such as job list, job profit reports. Now, job list, job profit can be run once a job has been invoiced or it's been moved to ready. You do run it off a list of jobs. You could have just one job in it if you wish. And what we're trying to look at is the things that have been completed, the things that have been invoiced or marked as ready, as I said. This allows you to see the income and the costs of the invoiced stock. It also allows us to see the billable hours and the income that's come from selling those hours. And then we have another section, which is the actual time and the actual costs of providing that time. So when you're looking at this report here, and this screen that you're on at the moment is telling us that we did actual labour, that we have different types of labour, who the people are who provided that labour, the time they took, and the value or cost of the time that they took. This integral to service businesses, because typically when we're looking at jobs that service companies offer, they look at the margin they make on product, they look at the billable labour as income, but this is a clear cost and has to be considered.
Fantastic. And so we can use the combination of the stock on the jobs, what we've billed for it, and then the actuals to work out the margins that we've actually got from that list of jobs.
Yeah, and there's two sides to this element here. One is, am I charging enough in my billable labour in time? And the second is, am I charging enough in my billable labour in dollars? So maybe the actual selling price of an hour's labour needs to be increased to cover the cost of the work that's being done.
You're referring there to the difference between, or the potential difference between actual labour and billable labour.
That's right. That's correct. And it can be significant. A business, if they're just looking at their P&L in order to see if they're moving, it's a very small, slow pattern to find this kind of problem occurring. It's far more specific if you look at individual service jobs or a list of individual service jobs to see whether they were profitable or not once you put in your actual time.
And of course, I didn't do any grouping on this, but there are a variety of groupings that are available, not only from different report types, but when we hit preview, we actually have options to group by customer and vendor so that we can see, a little bit more of that information on that individual level, as you were saying, Ian.
Correct.
Customer might look a little like this, although it's probably not as set up as well. We've got a customer with the stock, billable, and actual there. But we can do this with projects too, right, Ian?
Well, there is a version of this in the project profit reporting. That is correct. Now, it gets a little more complicated with projects depending on whether you're an MPS customer or not. But project profit reporting is essentially the same kind of breakup, showing you your actual hours and showing you the profit you made on that job, including the cost of those actual hours.
So we could potentially have a number of jobs gathered into several projects that we can look at from a much higher level while also capturing that detail.
And this is key to anybody who uses multiple jobs in projects over time. One of the things that we provide, of course, is implementations for putting Jim2 into the business. And there are so many jobs that we put into the system to have that project completed. So we look at our job profit, if you like, through this project profit report.
Fantastic. Now, Jumping back into the management reports, we can of course use the Top X stock report to see which stock was the high performers for the financial year, which can give us some insight into what we can focus more on in the coming year. To demonstrate, I've saved a set of filters for last financial year's top 10 stock ordered by profit, which I'll kick off now. As easy as that, we can see in this case only 6 because again, my demo system, but we can see what we've sold a lot of, the value, as well as profit information. But what about the stock that didn't perform? Can we see what didn't sell?
Well, we can, and this comes down to being able to create lists of stock in the first case and then filtering it. So this example you're about to run, when we have a look at it there, we can see it's just a stock list, and we've got the filter running in the dates area saying, show me stock that hasn't been sold between 2 dates. Now, hopefully all our customers are aware of how to use the date calendar grouping that's sitting there too, the number 31. And these are the most popular periods of time, making it really easy to select a range of dates that you want to search between. So this report is about to deliver to us the products that we haven't sold during those particular times on the screen. It's useful to tell you haven't sold it, but just keep in mind there may be other reasons why you haven't sold it, not just a demand one. It could be you haven't bought it either. There's been no purchases, we've had no stock, and as a result, we've found that it hasn't been sold. For that reason, you might want to use other filters in this list as well, such as only show me stock that is on hand, using, for example, the stock quantity report, stock quantity field at the top of that list.
Just for clarity, Ian, are you saying that this list will show if you've got active SKUs that have not been interacted with over the time period selected, and so may catch a bit of unwanted information?
Yeah, I think if you think about a circumstance of a new product, for example, that you only put into play, you're talking here an end date of the 30th of June, but imagine that you only put it into play on the 1st of June. You might not have even purchased that product as yet to bring it into stock. And so consequently, no, you haven't sold any, but you haven't had any either. So there's other things that you should run in this to filter the list to give you a more specific range of products to be reviewed.
So I do have another list prepared, which is the dates sold, and we can, enter the dates as before. I think there's a couple of reports we can use, but even the list itself, we can just use the column of sold to see how many did sell, or if there wasn't many sold, we could capture that as well.
Yes, and the great thing about a screen like this, if you have the security, you can simply right-click on that data and export it to Excel if you wanted to do some sort of other analysis on it. Equally, you can also use reporting itself, which is the various reports showing from the top of the screen that may be applicable and help you display this information.
Fantastic. So I think that was actually a question that came into the pre-webinar survey, is showing stock that didn't sell well as opposed to not selling at all. I do have noted here the stock activity list might be of some use here, Ian.
Yep, so that's going to give us the information based on those dates. It's really only talking about ins and outs that are quite simple here. Keep in mind there are other things that happen with stock, but yes, that answers the question as to have we sold any and what were they.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're coming up on time here. So today we covered a fair bit of things, how to perform a stock valuation, how to use the business analysis feature, and how to find the most valuable stock and actions over the year, as well as how to find what didn't sell particularly well. Thank you all for attending today. We'll just check the Q&A to see if any questions have come in. Nothing as yet, so I'll invite you now to pop in any questions you might have about any of the reporting you might like to do at end of financial year or otherwise.
I think it's worthwhile just reiterating that a lot of the things that we discuss here are, well, they're specific to individual customers. So if anyone has a question that they'd like to ask, and it might be in far more depth or require a much more in-depth answer, just contact support at happen.biz. We'll certainly pick up that job and come back to you and help you understand how you might be able to use these end-of-year practices or end-of-year reports to your benefit.
Absolutely. Our support team is always ready, willing, and able to answer all of your questions. So Michelle's asked how to get the sold column displayed in the stock list in the last example. So what you may be missing is if you right-click on the header bar of any list, you'll have an option called grid columns. Now, grid columns will show any columns that are not currently being used to display in the list. So if you click and drag, you'll see some green arrows appear as to where that column will appear. And if you let go, it'll pop that in. So maybe check in grid columns to see if that's listed in there.
I think possibly also, Michelle, you've just got to set that date sold option in the calendar. So that's the drop down, that's it, and make sure that's in play for you to get it.
Oh, if this was, so this was brought in, I think, 4.5. It may have been 4.4, and I'm not exactly sure. I know it was one of the more recent updates. So if this section isn't available to you, it may mean you need to update Jim2.
Well, we're using the advanced list to bring up that area of the screen, of course, and then
this too.
we're needing to go in and say, yes, I want the date sold, and then you'll get your column structure and your options as Ash just told you. In fact, that little one about right-clicking and seeing the other columns is a really useful tip for lots of our customers. Happens through all lists so that you can drag things around and even remove them from the screen if you don't need them.
Okay, Jimmy's asked, the set labour rate in the card file is for single time only. Can you please talk more about how to set the rate for overtime? I think we may have missed the explanation there. Ian, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, Jimmy, it's delightful to have you. New user for Jim2, so lovely to have you come into the webinar. As far as the overtime rates, we need to talk a little bit specifically with the businesses about it. We have what's called a multiplication factor, which allows us to say that in a given circumstance, when someone adds actual labour, that labour has an increased cost. Now, it's called a multiplication factor, and if you think that I've been wordy already, explaining this would be an absolute killer for this webinar, and we want you to come back. So what we'll do, Jimmy, I'll send some information to you. If anybody else would like information about the same topic, again, just drop us a line at support to happen.biz, and we'll send you the information as it applies. There's a little bit of setup work. It's not complex in terms of, it's not programming, it's just different areas of Jim that we need to feed that information into to get that rate to appear.
Thank you, Ian. Lorraine's asked, is there a way to export some of these reports into a manageable Excel format? She's also found that some have too many blank fields and removing some lines takes away certain information. Lorraine, there's a couple of ways that we can get this information into Excel. The first, as we explained earlier, would be to simply run a list to get the information you're looking for, right-click, and then export data. That's going to let you pull this into a Microsoft Excel file with the same information and columns that's available in the list. Alternatively, it will depend on the report, as some aren't formatted in the greatest way for Excel. However, if we do generate one of the reports at the top, you can then use the print option and then export. And from here, if I quickly rename this and then tick open file.
Just change your PDF option. Yeah, that's it.
Just caught it. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, no, the type of export is absolutely important. If we hit OK, then that will actually bring that out in an Excel format as well. So there is a couple of ways around that. But if you're having trouble with an individual report, by all means, let us know, and we will, get that looked at through our support team as quickly as possible. Okay. Is there any more questions? I can't see any in my list. I have a thing saying new questions, but not. Oh, it may be Lorraine's additional comment. Yes, it was individual report. Yep, no worries, Lorraine. Let us know which report that is, and we can get that looked at. Okay, I think that's all the questions for the moment. I'll just give a couple more minutes in case there was any additional. Normally when I start wrapping up, we get a few more popping in, so maybe we'll do that now. Thank you everyone for attending today. As Ian mentioned, our support team is always available to help out with any reporting needs that you might have. And yeah, we'll catch you at the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.